Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of this series that we're doing on a simple plan to wealth. We're going to go ahead and get started and jump right into it.
So now let's talk about investments. Like, where do you start? So both J.L. Collins and Dave Ramsey recommend starting in what's called tax advantage plans, right? Tax advantage systems. And so a tax advantage system is like if your job has a 401k or a 403b or like a Roth IRA or IRA, like those are what's called tax advantage accounts. And the reason they're tax advantage is because those come with advantages when it comes to taxes, right? Look at that. Pretty easy.
Even I can understand that, okay?
So let's say you have a job. I want to go with J.L. Collins first because I think he actually puts it out very simply. So the first place you should look at investing is into your job's 401k or 403b, especially if there's a match.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The first thing you want to do, if you have a match anywhere, you need to take advantage of it. So if your job says, hey, we'll do a 2% match or a 3% match of whatever you put in, then you should capitalize on that match. So your first priority is to invest until you hit that match in that 401k, 403b. So that's where you should first
Can I tell you a story about that?
Go.
So I have a friend who's been working at the same company for maybe 5 years, and we were talking, and he just kind of came across this fact that his company offers a match, and he just didn't really want to do the paperwork to go through with it, and so he didn't invest. And they have a 10% match, y'all. 10% match over 5 years with the same company. You're talking a lot of money. It's free money. So why you wouldn't take advantage of that? It is a headache to go to HR to fill out that paperwork, but really you're getting paid. When you think about what you're getting paid hourly to fill that paperwork out,
they're paying you to fill that out.
Best investment of your time possible.
Yeah. And so in your friend's situation, let's just pretend average salary. Let's say he makes $50,000 a year, or she makes $50,000 a year. That means that their company was willing to match whatever he was willing to put in up to $5,000. That's 10% of his income, up to $5,000. That's huge, right? That's $5,000 free dollars that you don't get anywhere else. So that's what's being put in there. And so you want to take advantage of that.
Yes.
And so that goes into a pre-tax account, meaning that you don't ever see it. It doesn't get into your bank account ever. Before they cut you the check, they take that $5,000, let's say, out of your paycheck. They put it into the account, and then they take their $5,000 and put it in your account. So selling you putting $10,000, making $50,000 a year, 5,000 of that was free. That's awesome, right? So take advantage of that. That's step one. Step two is to then, after you hit your cap on your max, is to go to a Roth account, right? So a Roth IRA.
Various credit unions will offer these services for little to no cost for
Banks,
you
credit unions,
to set one up, and you can do it for as little as $500 or $600 to open up a Roth IRA. That goes all the way up to $1,500, the minimum amount that you start with. But you can virtually do it for no fees. Like, it's very, very simple. You just make an appointment with your bank and walk in and sign a check, and it's done. Like, it's very painless. We recommend maxing that account out. And one thing that we learned over the course of time is, since we've been married, we kind of assumed that we were only allowed to have one Roth IRA. But even if you're married, you can each have a separate Roth account and max out both accounts, so you can really maximize those benefits.
That's right.
And how much can you max out each year?
So I think this year is $6,000 is the maximum. Over time, they increase it, decrease it, I don't know. But that's where we're sitting at right now in 2022. If
you have the money, max out every year on your Roth IRA. It's actually $7,000 if you're 50 years or older, too, because they want to give you some time to catch up.
Yeah. So once that's step two. Now, if you have any more money left over, because remember, J.L. Collins is thinking you're living on only 50% of your salary. So that means you should have money left over after you've maxed out your Roth. And so you put in let's say a $50,000 person put in $5,000 into their company match. And then now they're putting $6,000 into a Roth. So how much do they have left over?
I don't know. I didn't do the math in my head.
So you've invested now $5,000 into your company matched 401k. Then you invested $6,000 into your Roth, which means that you have $14,000 left over if you're living on half of what you make.
Okay, now I'm tracking.
Okay, so the next step is to now come back to your your tax advantaged 403b. That's again so you had your 403b match, right? And then you go to your Roth, and now you come back to your 403b because that's your next tax advantage step. It sounds a little confusing because you're coming back to it. But you're coming back to it and you're maxing out. Right now, you can contribute as an employee. You can contribute up to $20,500, and then your company can put whatever they want, right? But you can do up to $20,500, and so then your goal is to just invest the rest into that. And then if you have anything left over from that, you're putting into the fourth step, which is a brokerage account. And so now that is all taxed, and so that's your least tax advantage.
That's your
account.
least favorable of these options. So you want to do that at the very end when you've already maxed out your other accounts.
Yeah, but let me tell you what's happening with those dollars, right? So your 403b and your Roth, you cannot touch that money until you're retired. 59.5 is the earliest you can touch that money. There's some people that do kind of tricky things, like they're not tricky, they're legal, called conversion ladders and Roth conversions to be able to access that money even before they retire at a younger age. But most of the time, if you just kind of do it the plain Jane way, you can't touch it till you're 59.5. And so the idea is you're setting up a nest egg for yourself for the future. Now, as you do that, your goal is you're understanding what's happening with your money. Now, the 403b, the Roth IRA, that is not an actual investment, right? Those are just the package. That's how you're telling the government how to tax those dollars. So it's what you do in those accounts that matters. And so I'm just going to tell you what J.L. Collins says because I think it's pretty smart. So J.L. Collins actually, just like Warren Buffett suggests, that you should invest in, most people should invest in simple index funds, right? And so he recommends Vanguard's VTSAX.
Not a paid partnership.
No, we don't make any money.
Neither does he, though.
Yeah.
His whole book, he talks all the time about Vanguard, and he was always stating
he's not paid by Vanguard. But that's what he recommends. Now, I don't know what you want to use. You can use whatever system you want to use, whatever company you want to use. But really, your goal is to put it into the least amount of fees, like an account with the least amount of fees. You can also do mutual funds if that's what you're comfortable with. There's a lot of growth stock mutual funds. Dave Ramsey suggests kind of a little bit more sophisticated package of this percentage in a growth stock mutual fund, this percentage in a to
diversify.
But you don't need to worry necessarily about that right now. We're just walking you through what J.L. Collins says, right? And so however you're doing it, you are investing into the stock market. It's very passive. You don't have to go do anything, right? We have friends and we, love real estate. And the reality is, though, we know real estate is at times a little pain in the neck, right?
It is.
But I've heard somebody say, hey, you never have to worry about your mutual fund calling you because their toilet's not working. Doesn't happen, right? It's very passive. You don't have to worry about it. It just kind of does its own thing. The biggest thing I will say is that you don't want to be trying to touch that money, right? You don't want to try to take that money out early.
You'll be hit.
Right? Because there's penalties involved, there's fees or taxes involved. And so you're putting that money in with the full understanding. You're letting it stay there and grow. So this is the safest and easiest and best way to invest, which is just to buy and hold. Buy it. You're putting your money into whatever you're putting it into within your 403b, within your Roth, and you're letting it just sit there and cook.
Yes.
Right? It's just doing its thing, low and slow.
Which doesn't sound very sexy, though. Like, people want to make money, and they want to make it now. Like, they want an immediate ROI, return on investment, like Bitcoin provides, because they get to see, like, absolutely, as soon as I do this, and as soon as I get a transaction, I get an alert on my phone, and I get to see this big number. But this is what Warren Buffett says about single stocks and those kinds of transactions that are quick instead of slow and steady. He says this, and you have to pay attention to it because it's kind of funny. You can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant.
Now, I had to think about that quote for a second because I was like, what?
We were were like, that sounds kind of dirty. I don't even know. Is he like the new Nick Cannon or something? Like, I don't know what's happening there. But what he's saying is, like, you can't just force yourself into a situation that takes time. Like, single stocks really do cater to the mindset, like, oh, I want to get rich and I want to get rich quick and not worry about it. But that's just not how it's done. And in fact, that's how you lose money. And so if you're looking to get rich quick, this video probably was not very appealing to you because we told you not to do that and your risk skyrockets and you end up losing money in the long run. We really want to be advocates for the process, and it's really valuable.
Yeah. And so on that note, I think the reason the single stocks is more popular now than ever is partly because there's so many like apps and things like Robinhood. Those kind of situations where you can actually, it's pretty easy now to invest more than ever. And what I would say to that is, once again, you want to take advantage of tax advantage accounts first, right? So if you're a young person and you're throwing all this money into, Robinhood and whatever else, remember Robinhood's going to send you.
I used to call it Peter Pan. I had a coworker that would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh man, this app is so cool," and I'm like, "Oh, is your Peter Pan app?" Because I legitimately couldn't remember what it was called.
That's offensive.
I just couldn't remember. I was like,
Robinhood. But there's other apps just like that that do that, right? But the thing is, with those situations, you're in it's a brokerage account, right? Like, so you're going to pay taxes on that. They're going to send you a 1099 at the end of the year. Like, you're going to have to file taxes on what you made and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
A tax advantage situation like a Roth 403B, those kind of things. It's, with a 403B, that's a pre-tax account. So that's going in pre-tax. So you'll pay the taxes when you retire. And the point is, towards the end of your life, like when you're retired, you're making much less money. You're in a much lower tax bracket. So there's an advantage to that. But we love Roths because a Roth account is you're putting it in after you pay your taxes. It's post-tax. But all of that growth happening in that account. So you put in $200 like Jake or Paul or whoever we did, right?
Yeah.
It's really, all of that growth is happening in those accounts because of time.
Yes.
It's not necessarily about the amount you contribute, although that's a factor, right? It's not just about how much you contribute. It's also about the time you leave it in there.
Right.
And so putting it into Robinhood or whatever on a single stock, you do buy and hold for that, but all that growth, you're going to pay for it.
Some of you might be like, well, I really like that app and I like to do Bitcoin, and that's fine. I think it's fine. And, I have hobbies that don't contribute to our financial health, but treat it like a hobby. Don't treat it like an investment. Like, you're not doing that in the place of your 401k match. You're not doing that in the place of a Roth IRA. You're doing that knowing like this money I might never see this again, like with that knowledge up front, like if you go into it with that understanding, that's fine. Do whatever you want, but don't rely on it.
And if you're using those apps and they offer like a Roth or something like that, correct us. Like, I would love to know if they do that. But as far as I know, I don't know if that's the case.
So you might also be thinking, okay, this sounds really great, living off of 50% of my income, but it's kind of impossible. Like, I feel like a lot of people might be watching this video and being like, okay, that sounds great. If I was rich, I could do that, but I'm not making tons of money, and that just sounds really impossible for me to do. I love the energy that Samson has when it comes to investments because I really rely on that energy because I don't understand it as well as he does, honestly, but it's his wheelhouse, man. Like, he's up at night researching things. Like, he just, look at that face. Do you see it? Do you see this nerd face right here? Like, he loves it. And I think it's really beautiful when one spouse really delves into something and the other spouse can see the health in it and can see the beauty that it brings to the family unit, and also is just willing to trust, like, okay, like, this sounds good. He explains things to me on my level and asks my opinion about any time we're doing an investment. And we both pray about it. That's the process of these things, of course, and then we make a decision. But I want to encourage you. It's doable. You have to say no to a lot in the beginning. But we live a great life right now, and we're not, like, eating beans and rice these days, There was a season that we walked through when that was our norm. But if you go through that season, then on the other side of it, you can live on 50% of your income. It is doable, and you can still live a great life and travel and have nice things. It just takes delayed gratification.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing about investment, because it's investment for the future. You're doing the little bit right now that over the long haul will bear fruit.
You might also be asking the question, look, investments, I can tell you're both passionate about it, but why not just rely on Social Security? I'm giving part of my check to my retirement already. So why do I have to do more? G.L. Collins actually offers a lot of insight into this if you want to give those numbers.
Yeah, this was in his book, and it was written a little while ago. So some of these numbers actually might be kind of overrated or maybe
worse.
Too conservative. Yeah, it might be worse now. By 2033, the $2.7 trillion will be gone completely. After 2033, the payroll taxes then collected will only be enough to cover 75% of Social Security payouts. So some of us, by the time we're old enough to receive it, there is a chance it might not be there for some of us. I'm sure there's going to be a version of it for folks that really need it, but I think to say I'm going to wholeheartedly rely on Social Security, I don't think that's wise.
The numbers tell us like it's not going to be there. So like 75% of us may get some, but that means 25% of us will not get any. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know if they're going to have, the government's going to pull more money out of nothing, but we can only do that for so long, right? Before we're paying the consequences as an economy and as a nation. So relying on Social Security and the government to take care of you in your old age is just not a wise solution to your retirement issue.
Yep, absolutely. And then I want to end with this. Now, this is going to sound a little weird, but this is one of my favorite G.L. Collins stories from the book about why all of this matters. And he calls it, pardon what I'm about to say, he calls it having FU money. Okay?
He's a pastor. He's a pastor, and he just said that.
But I explain, because I'm just quoting him, okay? Please don't hold me to this. But part of what he talks about is the importance of having financial independence, and what that number would be in your mind for you to feel financially independent, so you could make your own decisions. And so he shared this story when he was just a kid, when he was just starting out in the workplace. He was a young man, I think he said he was like 17 or 18, his first job. And he was living this principle where he saved 50% of what he made. And so in a little while he had saved, and this is in the 70s, like $3,000.
Yeah, that wasn't a whole lot.
That was a whole lot back then. And so what he wanted to do, he always wanted to go on a 3-month long Euro trip vacation.
That is my level, okay?
Yeah. And so he goes into his boss and he says, hey, I'd like to go on a vacation for 3 months. I'd like to take some time off. And his boss in the 70s, and he's a young person that just started this company, was like, no way. We're not going to give you time off.
Long.
And so he goes back home. He thinks about it and he says, okay, what's really matters to me? What's important? And he knew he had $3,000 sitting there. And he said, you know what? I could quit this job, come back and figure something out after I go to Europe. So he goes back to his job and says, there's his boss, and says, hey, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to leave. Thank you for working with me on this, but I think I made my decision. Right. And then his boss says, whoa. Let's not make any rash decisions. And his boss says, let me see what I can do. So his boss goes to the boss's boss, and they negotiate and they work something out. And he comes back to him and he says, okay, how about this? We'll give you 7 weeks off. And then following that, we'll give you extra time off than anybody else in our workplace, because you're young, you're smart, we want to keep you around. And so he went back home after keeping his job, and he thought about what just happened. He had enough money in the bank to essentially determine what he was going to do with his life.
And no debt. He didn't have any debt.
So what that $3,000 bought him was negotiating power that he didn't even know he had. Right? And
this is similar to our story too. So when I had Charlie, we were going back and forth between whether I would stay home with Charlie or whether I would continue on as part-time. And I had...
Or you full-time?
Or full-time.
You were full-time at the time.
I was full-time at the time. And, we went back and forth. And so I had approached my bosses, whom I love, and told them that I really do love my job, but I'm just not able to, on a personal level, give a full-time commitment right now. And so can you give me a part-time position?
And there is no part-time in this department?
There wasn't. And so of course the answer was no. Like, we don't have part-time positions here in our department. And so I waited a couple of months, and then I go back into the office. We talked about it, Samson and I, and said, okay, well then if you can't have a part-time job, then why don't you just step back completely from your career and stay home with Charlie for as long as you need to, which we had no debt. And we had a cushion. We had the FU money that he's talking about. And so it wasn't.
It sounds dirty when you say it too. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. And so I went back into the office and I had the same conversation with my bosses and said, look, are you sure there's no part-time position available? And they said yes. And then I said, well, okay, then I'm going to have to put my notice in today. And the response from my boss at the time was, let us talk about it. Don't do anything rash, kind of the same situation. And then they came back and offered me part-time. And that wasn't something that I knew that I had in my pocket until I exercised my freedoms that had already been there, and it really does give you this bargaining ability that you didn't even know that you had, because you've been responsible and because you've practiced self-denial.
So what that, having that principle, living out that principle of living on less than you make, we were like, you know what? It was a simple decision, and it gave us bargaining power that we didn't even know we had, negotiation power we didn't even know we had. And that's the biggest tool that we want you to walk away with, is all of this. When we're talking about investing, we're talking about the future, is that you are right now working hard so that you create yourself freedom in the future. So that you can walk into any place and determine your own options, that you don't have to decide based on what's put on your plate for you. And that's what you're doing when you're creating financial independence. And as a believer, at the end of the day, we did this in our workshop, is like you are creating for yourself freedom to follow Jesus.
Yes.
So when Jesus tells you, hey, I want you to go on that missions trip, or I want you to go give to that single mom, or I want you to give to this ministry or this organization or this church, then you feel the absolute freedom because you're not tied to money, right? Because you've created freedom from all these things, freedom from debt, freedom from owing somebody anything, freedom even from your job, so that you have the freedom to do that. Like right now, we were talking about this recently with our friend Elaine. She was doing some work for our church, and she's an auditor, all that kind of stuff. She was doing some work, and so she was getting paid to do that. But she said, actually, I stopped doing that since actually you had somebody at your church retire, and they stepped in, and now they do that full time for free for the church, right? And so that is a gift that they're offering, a service, and that person I know could do that because they handle their money really well in life, and they can retire and do whatever they want. And guess what they want to do? They want to serve God. So for our friend, what he created was, I'm not going to call it FU money, okay? I'm going to call it for Jesus money. FJ money.
All right. Are you done?
I think I'm done.
Are you done? Okay. Well, we're really glad that you watched this video with us. We hope that you guys get as excited about it as we are. Clearly, Samson's like beaming. He's going to talk about it all night probably, about different investments. But we are thankful for you, and we want to hear about what you're investing in. So if you can leave a comment, like, and subscribe to this video, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.